How's it going, everyone? My name is Intempus. I'm going to show you how to use the Loopy HD app in the Apple App Store today. Let's get into it. The Loopy HD app is a really fun, simple, and fairly powerful tool that you can use to get your musical ideas down and be able to share those musical ideas pretty quickly. I really think that every songwriter, singer, beat maker should have this app in their arsenal. It's $3 to $4 on the App Store, but it is great in order to collaborate with people, to get new ideas down really quickly. This will be a fairly comprehensive video. I'm going to make sure that I go into the settings so you know how to use the app. I'm also going to give you some suggested settings so that right after this video you can get started, no problem. One thing with the Loopy HD app that I suggest is for you to get some wired headphones. The Bluetooth headphones, still to date, there's still too much latency when you're real time trying to sing something in. There's just a delay between the phone and the headphones, and it's really hard to hear and monitor correctly. Get yourself a good pair of wired headphones, or just any. The Apple ones actually do have a microphone built into it. So if you have headphones like these ones, still have headphones like these ones, these are excellent for recording into Loopy. But if you just have a regular pair of wired headphones, those are perfect also, because the app will actually go ahead and use the built-in microphone in Loopy. But wired headphones are basically still the way to go. There are some basic musical concepts that I think we should know before getting into Loopy. If you're already musically versed, you can skip ahead, but this is going to be for the people who are brand new, trying to get started. So here we go. The basic musical concepts that Loopy is based on is, well, loops. What is a musical loop? Basically, a loop is a musical idea repeated over time. And that loop has a start and an end point. Most music that we listen to now is in groupings of 4. 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 beat groupings, and those groupings have a name as well. They're called bars. And yes, that's what rappers are referring to when they say I got bars. The other concept is how fast or slow you count those beats is the tempo, or BPM. So this is a slower tempo than this. So just a quick recap. The 3 concepts you need to know are musical loops, beats and bars, and the tempo, or BPM. Now that we know that, or at least got the basics of it, let's go ahead and dive in to the Loopy HD app. All right, so now we are here and inside the Loopy HD app. And right off the bat, the first thing that most of us are going to see is this simple interface with these circles, which are our loops, and this blue menu bar at the bottom here. So just a quick little breakdown of what we're looking at right now. Each of those circles is going to be an individual loop that we can either record into or we can import a loop into. So before we actually start looking into pressing the loops and recording loops, let's just get familiar with the interface first. And the first thing I want us to look at is this blue menu bar on the bottom. And there's a couple of things happening. So we can see there's a little play, pause button right in the middle there. And you see those lines that are moving? Those lines are moving because that is monitoring the audio input going into the app. So every time I talk, you notice that that's going off. Cool. So we know we have audio going in. The circle on the left that's blinking is actually a really helpful visual cue. So if we press the play button, you see that circle going around, and it's actually blinking to the beats in that bar. So it's going around. Top is 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it repeats. That's our loop right there. That's how we have it set up at the moment. Really helpful visual cue, and we'll come back to that later. So remember those musical concepts that we talked about. The icons on the right, and it could be really hard to see, but there's additional menus that are available to you in this interface. And it's really important that we go into some of these. So if we swipe up, here's another menu. And this one's really important as well. This has to do with the bars, or how many bars you're going to record. So right now, if we look at the left, we can still see that blinking, looping visual, and there's a 1 inside of it. The way we have it set up right now, we're going to record a bar of audio, or a group of 4 beats. The multiply and divide, what's that all about? Multiply, now we can see that number changed to 2. That means we're recording 2 bars now. And you can actually see that that looping visual takes a little bit longer to get to the top now. And that's because it's counting 8 beats altogether, 2 bars, 2 groupings of 4 beats. We can go further and do a 4-bar length loop. And you can see it's taking even longer to get all the way around. Most of the time, we're recording 2-bar, 4-bar musical loops, sometimes 8 and 16 if it's a longer idea. But you know, we can go all the way up to 128, 256, 512, but most of the time you're really not going to be using those. Usually they're going to be shorter ideas. There's also 3 little dots on the bottom of the multiply and divide, and if we swipe, they're plus and minus signs, and basically you can add or subtract a single bar. But that's more of a specific use case. I would more so just recommend keeping to an even 2, 4, 8-bar loops, especially when starting out. So let's go ahead and swipe up to another menu. And the next menu we have, there's a little metronome icon and a light icon. So if we click on the metronome, that is actually going to turn on an audible metronome that is hitting every single beat in the bar. That way you have a sort of audio cue when you're recording your musical ideas, something to keep you in time. That's really helpful. But you also have the option to hit the light button, which is actually going to blink your screen instead of audio. Sometimes that's really helpful if you don't have headphones and you still want to record, but the metronome would be recorded if you have it on. The light is really helpful. So you have an audio or visual cue to keep you in time. Let's turn that off for now, and let's go to the next menu here in the blue menu bar. So we swiped up, and now we have this thing that says tap. We have 80 BPM, and it says 4/4. So this has to do with tempo. This is our tempo menu here. And tap essentially means that you can tap in a tempo. Let's say you don't know what the tempo is, but if you tap 4 times, you tap a single bar, it'll kind of guesstimate what tempo you're looking for. So if you have an idea and you're like, man, that's my tempo, it's really fast, you can tap that in. Or if you know the tempo or the BPM, you can adjust it with the slider right here. So, right or left goes up or down, and you can find the tempo that you like to work in. For the most part, I actually like to work in lower tempos. That's just me. It fits my musical style. The 4/4 is something most people are not going to mess around with. That has to do with the time signature of the music, and most standard popular music that we listen to now is 4/4 timing. I would probably suggest just keeping it the way it is. But basically, the top number is how many beats are in the bar. The bottom number is what note constitutes a beat. So in that song. I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's a little more on the musical theory side. So we can go ahead and move on from here. If we swipe up again, look at that. We're back to our play pause button here. So that's the blue menu bar. You have access to really important functions right from this interface without ever going into the settings. Keep all those in mind, and we're gonna move on and dig a little deeper into the settings. So let's do this. If you see on the bottom left here, there's a little up arrow next to the blinking circle. That's what we're gonna click on. And this brings up a whole other menu. So from here, I'm actually gonna go ahead and just leave a screenshot in the video for you guys who just wanna get up and going in Loopy. I'll give you some suggested settings. That way, you don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to, but I highly suggest that you do so that you understand where you can find certain things and what they do for your session. So without further ado, this will be the little section with the screenshot. So what we're looking at here, you can see our blue menu bar is back up at the top. There's a couple of buttons here. There's like a paper with a flap, with a folded flap, and a record button. If we hit the paper flap thing here, that's our reset session. That'll wipe all the settings that you just put for that session and just give you a basic template again. So if you want to reset the session, that's where you'll do it. This record button here is actually a session record button. So if you have a loop or a song idea that you're really happy with, and maybe you want to export it to put it into your DAW or share it with a friend, you hit that record button and it'll record all of the audio that you have in the loops from the previous interface right here. So those recordings are actually going to be on the bottom here where it says recordings. This is where it will record into, and that's where you'll find them. You can play them with that button there. You can tap on one of the names, and this is where you can change the name to whatever you would like it to be. So just remember that that's there. You can also delete by swiping to the left on any of these names. Let's go back to this section here. Sessions is where you can actually save the current session that you have to work on later. Pretty self-explanatory. That's where you can click Save the Current Session by going into Sessions and hitting Save Current Session. Same thing, you could swipe to the left to delete any of the sessions that you have, and it has an immediate share button there, which will share either the Loopy session or the samples that you recorded, which is really, really cool. If somebody else has Loopy, you'll be able to export the whole session to them so they can add on to it also. Let's go ahead and now dive into the settings, but real quick, I just want to show you this help button on the way bottom. It shows you the gestures that you'll use for the loops on the other interface. These are really, really useful, and they're almost essential to know. So take a good look at that. There's some really, really excellent tutorials and topics for you to get started with as well. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into any of these concepts, it's all going to be there. That's actually where I learned a lot of this also. So highly encourage for you to check that out. Now let's dive into the settings, and we're going to go through what they mean, but also I'm going to make sure that you get a suggested setting. So I would follow what goes on here just so you have something that you can be happy with. And there's no wonkiness in the beginning when you're getting started. So if we hit the settings button, you can see we have 4 other tabs: General, Track Management, Control Inputs, and Clock Sync. Before we get into those, let's stay on this page. There's a couple important features here. And right after that, we see Input Gain. This is how much volume the audio input is recording with. So if it's set too low, it's going to be really hard to hear, and that could cause some issues. If it's set too high, you run the chance of basically distorting your signal by getting too loud of a signal, and then it clips, and then it starts to sound really ugly and distorted. I would usually put this a little under. Unfortunately, right now, I don't know why I can't move it over. I think it has to do with the monitoring, maybe? No. Generally, if you're able to adjust the input gain, I would put it maybe 3/4 of the way. That's usually a good place to put it. Reverb is also, it's not necessary, but it's helpful. When you're hearing yourself, if you need a little more of a vibe, a little more space in order to get into the mood of what you're singing, reverb can help with that. A lot of singers, musical artists will put reverb onto their vocals just to get a sense of space, to put themselves in the music more. So it's a useful tool. So it depends on your style, but, you could put this wherever you like. It's a personal preference, really. Let's go down from here. We have monitoring, which for the most part, I have that on because, like I've said, you really should have wired headphones when you're using Loopy. Usually you'll want to hear yourself in what you just recorded. So in order to do that, you'll need headphones. Monitoring means that you'll be able to hear yourself in the headphones when you have them plugged in. But if you don't, it's going to be disabled because what you don't want to have happen is you sing something in, and then the speaker is playing it out, and then you're trying to sing it in. It's going to create this thing called feedback, and it's possible that it'll blow out your speakers on your phone, as well as it's just really hard on the ears. So monitoring's on for me. I would have it on for you because it's really helpful to hear yourself. Live input recording, like it says on the bottom here, when enabled, session recordings will also record the live audio input in addition to the track audio. So what this means is when you record a loop, that session's recordings here, when we went in here and we had these recordings, that's when you hit this session recording and the recordings go there. But what happens is when you have this enabled, every time you record a loop, that loop is going to be recorded into recordings. And you might not necessarily want that because it can start to get cluttered really easily. So I just keep that off. And when I'm ready to record a certain something, I'll hit the record on the sessions button and then, solo that track or that loop, or just record the whole thing. That's just a suggestion, but I typically keep that off. The next one is play in background. Play in background is basically you can close the app and the music will still be playing in the background. That's really helpful, especially if you want to use other apps and have them both working together. It has to be playing in the background, and I have that turned on because I'm always pairing different apps on my phone together. One app might have a beat and then I'm adding on to it with Loopy. So having the audio play in the background is really, really helpful. So I have that on. Now let's go into these other 4 tabs that were at the top, and we'll just go through them really quickly here. So now we're in general, and let's see what we got. So shake to reset is just a cool little feature where you can literally shake your phone and it'll reset the session without going to the menus. I just like those cool little shortcut features, so I have that on. Noise gate and expander, for the most part, I would say leave this disabled just because, if it's a gate, that means any audio that is over the threshold, it's going to play. Any audio that's under the threshold, it's going to mute it. So that's helpful to get rid of noise. But sometimes if you're singing, the noise gate will flutter in and out, and it's not great sounding if it's not set up properly. That could be really helpful for like drums, for example, but for the most part, I would say keep that off. The expander helps as well to kind of bring up some of the noise, but for the most part, I would leave that for post-processing, especially since this is just getting the ideas down. Don't worry about that too much. That's just my opinion. Going down from there, track layout. This is actually where you can change the layout of how many loops you have in that initial interface. So let's say we wanted 12 tracks. If we go back to the the main interface, basically, now you can see we have more apps or more loops to mess around with, which is really helpful. If you know you're going to need more tracks, that's where you can set it up. So I usually just keep it at 8. I'm happy with 8 for the most part, but feel free to change that around. Session date sorting is just a way for the audio tracks to have their titles situated. I keep that on because date sorting is actually really helpful for me. Latency is something to keep in mind in general when it comes to latency and the frames. Think of this as giving more resources for the app to utilize in order to perform. So in general, having a low frames setting is good for recording. Having a higher frames setting is better for playback / post-processing. I'm a mix engineer and a recording engineer, so I mess around with this a lot. When I'm recording, I'll put it at 128 frames. If I'm playing back and maybe I have some issues and it's skipping or it sounds a little funky, I'll change the frames to a higher setting. That gives the app some more resources to utilize. And so hopefully that solves any sort of problems when you're playing it back and you're hearing a bunch of kind of digital skips and stuff like that. Let's go into metronome. Metronome is where you can change the sound of the metronome. So I like the woodblock sound, but it's personal preference. There's a kick and hi-hat and a click basic sound. So you can change that, just whatever your personal preference is. Advanced, here there's a couple more features that you can do that are a little more out of the scope of this video, I would say. For the most part, I would just maybe utilize the settings that I have like this. Maybe sometimes I'll have audio bus session loading on, just depending on if I'm using audio bus 3. But again, outside the scope of kind of what I want to get into with this video. And for the most part, that's the general tab. Track management is something else that is that you'll probably be diving into every now and again also. So clear after merge, what that essentially does is, let's say you record a 4-part harmony and now you just took up 4 tracks on Loopy and you want to merge them all together instead of taking up 4 tracks. Maybe you just want to take up 1. So clear after merge basically is once you merge those 4 tracks together, they'll be cleared off of the Loopy interface and you'll have additional tracks to mess around with. Fit imported loops is essentially fitting the loop that you're importing to the tempo of the track that you have. That way everything stays in line. So that's especially helpful as well. I have that switched on. Fade in and out. In general, I would disable this because I don't necessarily think that you want to have a fade in out in your loops. If you do, it'd probably be better to do that in post-processing. So I have that disabled. Overdub after record, I have that switched off for now, but that would be particularly helpful if you have musical ideas and you want to just keep layering them on one single loop. But for me, I have that recorded off because typically I'll record my musical idea in and I want it to stop right after the loop is done and have a nice, clean, pristine loop without any additional audio being recorded. Simultaneous recording I have off because I don't necessarily know, I don't want 2 tracks to be recording the same audio. I don't see the use in that for my personal uses, so I have that switched off. Synchronized tracks I have on. That way all the loops play at the same time and they're all nice and concise loops. Play from start I have turned off as well. Count in recording I have on also because I like to hear the click before the loop begins. So I have that switched on, and the count in is 1 bar. So that means when you hit record, it'll give you a bar to record. So basically, I want to show you that really quickly. So if we press play and we see that loop going around on the bottom in the blue menu, right? And right at the top is the 1. So if we wait for it to come around and we hit here, you can see that we have about a bar count in every time we hit to record there. So you see it going around and it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. And that can change with that quantize setting. Let's say we do 2 bars, and now we'll see that it gives us 2 bars to mess around with when we're about to record. So we'll start at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it just does that. It gives you time to hit record and get ready to record the audio as well. So really helpful feature. You can kind of set the count in quantize to whatever helps you. Usually I'll have it set to a bar, maybe 2, just depends. Count out recording I have enabled because that means when recordings will end automatically in time with the set loop length. So I like that. It keeps the loops nice and concise, but you can disable it or disable instant end. Feel free to read those and check it out. But for the most part, I like to have that enabled. Count in, count out, mute, I have that on as well. Control inputs, if we go back to the general settings page here, or just the settings page, the third menu here, control inputs, this has to do, it's a little out of the scope of the video again, but it's really, really cool as well. What this is if you have a Bluetooth MIDI controller, you can actually set different functions in the app and be able to control them on the Bluetooth MIDI controller. And you have a ton of features that you can map. So, if you hit, let's see, Bluetooth key bindings here, add bindings, you have all these actions that you can do. You can adjust the tempo, the clock lengths. If you go into track actions, you have all of these features, mute and solo tracks, and you have all of these advanced features also that you can map to a Bluetooth MIDI controller. It's really, really awesome, and I think I might do a video on that later because it's a little out of the scope of what we're doing right now. But control inputs is really, really amazing. Clock sync has to do with the MIDI as well, and again, it's a little out of the scope of this video. However, there's one thing I want to point out. This is where you would find the Ableton Link function, and this is where you can enable or disable Ableton Link. What is Ableton Link? Basically, it's a function in apps and in Ableton where you can sync the tempo of different devices together to play in sync over a Wi-Fi network. It's really, really awesome, and you can actually do it inside your phone without any Wi-Fi. Basically, if you enable 2 Ableton Link apps, the tempo will be synced. So when you play one, it'll play the other in the same timing, which is amazing. The tempo changes if you're changing it from one app or another app. The tempo would change for both. It's really, really excellent and a great way to collaborate, as well as if you have a beat and you want to sync that beat to what you did in Loopy, that's how you would do it. All right, guys, so that's really all of the settings within Loopy. We covered most of it. We have a basic template that we can work on right now. So this is great. I want to go ahead and show you now Loopy in action, and that way I can show you kind of the useful features that you can do when you actually record within Loopy. So let's really quickly put a musical idea down and see where we can go from there. So I have my headphones on. Again, I highly recommend you get some wired headphones. These ones in particular too from Apple actually has a microphone right here. So this is really great for getting musical ideas down in Loopy. So let's see what we can do real quick. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the tempo or the metronome, and now we can hear that wood block tempo there. Let's just put something in real quick. So right there, we just recorded a 2-bar loop. Nice. Let's add on to that real quick, maybe a little bass line. Let's say I want to change the volume, because, maybe I want to adjust that a little bit. So if you hold down the button in the middle there, you can actually change the volume here. You can bring it down by swiping down. You can bring it up. Bring it down a little bit here. If you say you didn't like what you just recorded, you can swipe down in the middle of any of these loops, and you have the option to re-record, to clear it out, or just to cancel, to get out of that menu. And let's go ahead and record a few more, and I want to show you that merge feature. See, I didn't like that one, so I'm going to clear that. Let's do that one more time. Okay, and just like that, if you just swipe one of the loops and drag it into another one, that'll actually merge those two tracks there. So now we have that extra loop to mess around with, which is really excellent. And you can also move the loops around by holding in the middle and bringing it to a different loop there. So that's really the basics of Loopy right there, and you can keep adding on, and you can actually export these loops also. So if you swipe or if you hold down in the middle there, you can share that single loop and you have all those options. You could also now go to session record and click play. And if we go into recordings, now we have this. And from there, we can go ahead and rename the track, Loopy Test Video. Nice. And just like that, we have this recorded track right here, and we can actually go ahead and share that if we would like. So there it is, guys. That is the Loopy HD app. That is basically an overview of the entire app right there. I really hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, I think every songwriter, singer, beat maker should be utilizing this app, whether for collaborative purposes or just to get your ideas down every single day. This is a really powerful app, and you can do so much with it in the app mobile music ecosphere at the moment. I'm planning on doing a lot more like mobile music production videos, checking out music apps, doing a bunch of things on the channel. So subscribe, man. And if this has helped you learn this app, or you enjoyed it or got something out of it, leave a like, man. It really helps the channel a lot. Tremendously, really. Once again, my name is Intempus. Thank you guys so much for checking this all out. Have a good one. Oh, and check out the Twitch live stream. I'm going to be starting my live stream yet again, so check that out. It's twitch.com/Intempus Music. Hope to see you guys there.